Hello, Zeteo here. Welcome to another Beyond All Reason replay analysis. In the last video, we covered Phrog playing on a 2v2 on Tangerine. In this video, we're going to be covering his ally, which is the blue player here, Masokki. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm going to skip over some of the details that I talked about in the last video because it is the same exact match, but we're just going to cover blue's perspective instead of green's. You know, if you're looking for a little bit more detail about like certain aspects of the map and how to adjust for that, I'd suggest checking out that last video. But yeah, in this video, I'm going to be focused more on things like the unit composition that you build and why, what to do if you run into a lot of pork. Pork is basically just static defenses, is just what we call it. We're going to cover the T2 transition and some more like map specific strategies. Since there is some water on this map, there's certain things that you can do that you can't do on other maps. So anyways, let's get into it. Unpause, player view, okay. All good stuff. Alright, starting with the mechs. Good. This is a good spot to start. Grabbing the wind turbine. Alright. You can actually get away with skipping this wind turbine for now and getting it after the mechs. So if you're going to do like a 2 mechs opener, or pretty much any opener, always starts with at least 2 mexes. You know, sometimes on some maps that might mean walking to grab your second mechs. But yeah, usually 2. And after you get the 2 mexes, then you want to add on 3 wins or so, depending, you know, you're trying to get up to like 6 plus 60 energy before putting down the lab, and that'll just help you get the lab up safely. But yeah, you can just rearrange this a little bit so that you can have that extractor sooner. I guess just to throw this out there, if you're gonna go for a 3 mech start, which I do recommend, if you're trying for a more economic opener, that's definitely the way to go. You can do things like okay, so I have to break this down into a couple of categories here. So you can do like 3 mexes in a row and then start grabbing energy, but if the 3 mexes are close enough together and your commander doesn't have to like walk to get to the 3rd mex, you can't really put down a wind turbine because you'll stall in energy. So if you're going to do an opener like that, then you're going to want to do something like a solar collector beforehand. And there's some details to optimize that a little bit more, but for now that'll probably suffice. If you're doing so in this particular spot, you can grab these 2 mexes. You'll walk a little bit to grab this 3rd mex, and you might be able to put down a wind turbine off that. And if not, then you can do a solar collector. I don't know, play around with it. I've only played this map like once, so there's that. I'm not quite like, this is pretty close to, you know, maybe you can't get away with it. I'm just not 100% sure. But if they are 3 close together mexes and you don't have to walk, you'll definitely stall after that 3rd mex if you try to build a wind turbine. You'll stall in energy because the wind turbine, like the mexes and the wind turbine, cost energy. Whereas if you grab a solar collectors do not cost energy, so you'll prevent stalling. You'll actually stall for like a half second. There's like little tidbits to do to maybe correct that. But if you don't want to stall that little tiny bit, then you can, you know, start the solar collector, either finish it or not finish it. But either way, you're letting your energy build up a little bit first, since the commander has 25 energy income on him. So you will gain a little bit as you go. But yeah, if they were close, what you want to do is grab 2 mexes, 1 wind turbine, the 3rd mex, and then add on your other 2 or 3 wind turbines after that before the lab. Hope that makes sense. If not, please ask questions. Yeah, as it is, it looks like you're doing a little bit of walking around, so it's a little bit unfortunate. I'm not sure if that's like you're like just trying to place your lab and you screwed up like trying to click on the buttons or the, you know, hitting the hotkeys or what. But yeah, you place the lab exactly where the commander is. and that means your commander has to walk out of the way first. So it would have been a little bit more optimal to like maybe place it up here instead. Um, and ideally you want to queue that stuff up beforehand so that you don't run into those issues. So that if you do run into an issue, you know, your commander's still building the last thing, and so you can correct, you know, whatever issue that you have with it. Just to optimize that a little bit more. But here, yeah, wind is great. So like you actually got the 60 income with just 2 wind turbines here. Lets you get out that lab a little faster. That means your first unit's out a little bit faster. Very tiny optimization, but it's not bad. So here, so anytime your energy dips down like this, it should be like a big warning signal. You know, especially early on, you want to keep an eye on your energy. And anytime it dips down, try to do this a little bit faster, because assisting your lab when you're stalling is not really gonna help. Right, so you built one's not enough. You do need to build a bit more here, and that's a general thing after you get your lab, is to just add on a bunch of wind turbines. You do have your resurrection bot out to grab some trees as well, so your energy is gonna look a lot better now. But the thing is, you don't want to rely on this. You want to like still build some wind, but this resbot will help you get out, you know, faster constructors, faster units, you know, whatever you choose to do. You know, and those fast constructors can help you get the mexes faster so that you get more income faster, and all that. So looks like you're getting a lot of units first. No constructor yet. So yeah, it's good that you're chasing this you know, this scout down. But if you're going to open units, you know, ideally you want some of those units to actually do some aggression. You want to do something to them. You don't want them just sitting around doing nothing. It's good that you have at least one to defend with, but like these other ones could be moving forward, potentially, especially since your commander can gun it down too. Like, don't forget you can move them around to you know, deny the scout. Alright, so first constructor's out. You're getting a turret right away. Given your metal income, like that's not bad. Your energy is a bit low for it. Like usually you want something more like 200 energy income. But yeah, usually you want to prioritize like assisting a lab with it. Maybe your second, or maybe your first one grabs some of these mexes. But your first or second constructor should definitely do stuff like that. We'll see what your second one does. So you added on a little bit more energy, that's fine. Okay, so now you're walking. Personally, if you're going to open with a fast construction turret, I feel like you could have boosted it like all the way. And if you run out of energy, you just build like a wind turbine and then go back to boosting it. And that way this gets done faster so that it can actually start helping you a bit. But yeah, the reason why I say try to grab these mexes fast is because, you know, the sooner you grab them, the faster you can benefit from them, and the slower your energy bar will go down. And then if it's going down too slowly, or if it starts rising, then you want to add on a construction turret. And the whole reason why you'd want to build a construction turret this early is because your commander's still at the base and can assist it. So the fact that it's not like being assisted by the commander just means that it's not going up quickly, so that it's just a lot of time that your lab is not being as productive because nothing's assisting it. Alright, so here it's good that you're grabbing these mexes. I would say this Khan could grab this other mex over here and then just queue up some wins or something like that, because you're going to need some energy as you start grabbing more of these mexes. I like the fact that you're moving your commander up. I feel like this light laser tower is not really necessary here. Like, this position's not great because units can still swing in this way. It's kind of the same issue that green runs in later, where he has like a bunch of turrets here, but then, or actually we can see the outlines of it, or no, they're actually back here. But yeah, he has a bunch of turrets here, which means the enemy can run in this way. So the whole idea is you want to block that off and maybe station, turrets more at the choke because that'll cover the entire area. All right, anyways, moving along. These are all just little tidbits to optimize the opener a little bit. Um, Not really the main focus of the video necessarily, because there's certainly some other things I want to point out. But yeah, here you're out of metal. You have only 9 income, and this construction turret, that costed 210 metal. It's assisting the lab, but it's like over assisting it. It's just like too much, considering you're also building mexes, considering you're also building stuff with your commander. It just like adds up to a lot of metal. So that's one of the reasons why I say that this is too early. So in some sense, it's like you're trying to build too much and you just don't have the income for it. And it's like, yeah, it's good to be building these mexes, right? Because that boosts your income. It's good that your commander's building the turret. That's great. But at the same time, it's just like extra build power that you don't really need quite yet. Personally, at this point in the game, I try to assist a bit more with the construction bots. Because it adds a little bit of energy or a little bit of build power while not costing like a ton. Okay, I don't know where did that metal come from? All of a sudden you just have like a bunch of metal. I don't know if you got some reclaim or what. I kind of missed it, to be perfectly frank. Yeah, so one of the things that you might want to adjust is just, as you grab these mexes, just add on some energy to anticipate the need. You already have the construction turret, but like usually around now would be like a reasonable time for it, assuming that you have the energy and you just don't quite have it at the moment. Alright, so it's good. I think it's good that you have your commander out here in the front. You're putting up these turrets, so that means your opponent is defending all the way back here, and this is a much easier spot to defend than like in the middle, because it's such a wide, like it's a lot of area for you to put towers and stuff down on, and it's a very narrow area for your opponent. So that all makes perfect sense. And you got a nice frontal radar here, and stuff like that. So now I want to switch into talking a little bit more about unit compositions and the differences between bots and vehicles. So bots, actually, let me start with vehicles. So vehicles are a little bit more straightforward, in my opinion. They're kind of like they're more expensive in metal, but at the same time they're also like a little bit better at straight up fighting in some cases. They can just like tank a lot more hits so that they can more easily fall back and get repaired before getting killed off. In a lot of cases they're a little bit faster, but they have the downside of they turn around very slowly. Well, bots have, they turn a lot faster and they can get up and down hills a lot easier. So the fact that this is relatively flat means that vehicles do rather well here. And especially because it's a narrow area, that means that you can't really run around your opponent as easily. Whereas like vehicles are a little bit better at straight up fighting some of those things. Whereas bots, their turn speed allows them to maneuver a lot more. So they can run up, see a bunch of stuff, and just immediately turn around and back out. Whereas vehicles kind of have to do like if you try to turn immediately with the vehicle, they're going to take a whole lot of time to turn around, and they're just going to take damage that entire time. So what that means is bots can be great at running around things. They can especially things like grunts, they can walk up. They have a little bit more sight range than other stuff. Like their sight range is 500, whereas like the thug has a sight range of only 380. So you can use that sight range to your advantage. See like something like a light laser tower, like you can see the range uh, ring. These from your towers, we can see that there's these red circles here, and that's the range of the light laser towers in your case. Um, but yeah, once you scout the light laser tower, you see that ring, and you can avoid it with a bot much easier because they don't. It's like if they accidentally walk into that ring, they can just back out really quickly. Same thing with units. Like they can see a unit, see the ring, and just back out, abuse that unit's um, lack of turn rate if it's a vehicle, and basically run around and do some potential rating damage. And that's one of the really strong points of being bots, is being able to run around stuff. But here, because this is so narrow, there's nowhere to run around. This is already well defended against bots, so like there's not much you can do about it other than try to bust it down, and tanks are going to be a little bit better for that. In terms of actual like which bot to get, because don't get me wrong, like you're not screwed because you went bots. Like definitely not true. Um, Thugs are reasonable at assaulting locations, but they have less range than a static, light laser tower. So what that means is they'll take some damage as they're assaulting stuff, um, and their shots are plasma, and those shots they move through the air slower, so there's chance to miss, and all that. Um, so here in this particular case, I would recommend more rocket bots. Rocket bots, that they have like a heavy hitting, longer range. Um, they shoot rockets, obviously, um, and while they're pretty easy to dodge, at the same time, they don't shoot over stuff like a plasma shot, like, has a trajectory of going up in the air and back down, whereas a rocket just flies straight on. So what that means is the dodging is a little bit different, whereas like, against plasma bots, um, you can maneuver in such a way that the shot just goes overhead, or it just like falls short, or whatever. Whereas a rocket, you kind of have to do more of a lateral movements of like, oh, it's going, this rocket's going down this path, so now I want to go to the left or to the right to like dodge it. So it's a little bit different, and it's in a way like harder to dodge to some degree. And with the extra range, they can do a lot more, and it's a bit of a heavier damage too. So things, so they're especially good against things like vehicles, because the vehicles have a harder time like turning that, laterally like that. They have to make like a bigger circle to like turn more effectively, and either way they're like gonna slow turn and take some damage probably. Um, and also rocket bots are just better against static. So if these are static things here, you can gun that down with the rockets, um, depending on what kind of static it is. Light laser towers, they're really good against. The twin guard or the beamer, they're like those things outrange the rocket bots, but at the same time, rocket bots can still do a lot of damage to them. So you can like work up a bunch of rocket bots, fire all those rockets at once at the tower, and then just back out. Things like that. Here in your particular case, looking at the situation, you have a forward radar, and you know that there's only this many dots here. Not only that, this one's an incisor, and this one is an incisor. The chances of these other dots also being incisors is pretty good, and you definitely have a force to reckon with that. Looking at these thugs here, so you can actually just like assault this spot. At least poke at it, get some information. If it ends up being something you can't really fight, say it's a bunch of medium tanks, or maybe it's a pounder. Pounders, by the way, very good against bots, but they are also very slow. So the way you abuse that as bots is you just ignore them and run around those pounders. But again, in this narrow area, you can't really run around pounders, because where are you going to run around to? You're still going to get shot by them, right? Um, but yeah, it'd be good to check and see. Just like green, green had an issue with that as well in the last video, where he didn't really check to see what was there, so it just looked like a bunch of dots that could have been units. Alright, so now this red player is putting up a wall, which makes it more difficult for you to assault that. Walls, by the way, don't block a lot of things. When it comes to walls, it really depends on the height of the thing, like behind it, or the height of the wall. So things like light laser towers are a little bit taller, and so basically everything can still shoot them. Like a wall does not defend a light laser tower. But if it's a lower to the grounds thing, like it's a solar collector or a metal extractor, there's much less chance for things to actually, for like those lasers or bullets to get through. And then you got to consider the trajectory of the projectile. In the case of like plasma bots, plasma bots, their shots go up and then back down, so they can shoot over the wall and still hit things pretty easily. Whereas things like this grunts, their weapon is very direct. It's very straight, low to the ground, and so walls protect against grunts pretty well. Another note to make about walls is they prohibit movement. So it's harder to, it's kind of like having these 4 walls here means now your units can't travel there, so they have to go around this way, which means red can concentrate more defenses here. So there's little things like that, but either way, I think you have a force to be able to at least look at this. And in fact, I'm going to take off your view for a moment to just show you what is here. Okay, so it is a bunch of pounders. I actually expected it to be more incisors at this point. But yeah, if you ran up here and saw pounders, absolutely run back. In order to deal with pounders, you want those rocket bots, like I was saying, because actually I didn't mention them in terms of the pounder itself, but rocket bots have longer range. These pounders have shorter range. They only have 315 range. These thugs have 380 range, so they do technically outrange them, but you have to micro them like back to not take damage, basically. Otherwise, the pounders will just like close the gap, move in on your units and destroy them, because they're very, very good against bots if they can get close enough to them. Just to show you the range of the rocket bot has 475 range. So that's significantly more than these pounders and the thugs. Anyways, enough rambling about that. Hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully I didn't ramble too hard on that. Yeah, okay, so here's the next thing I want to talk about, and this is good. I like that you're doing this. So this map obviously has a lot of water on it, and I think it's very easy for a lot of players to just kind of ignore the water and call it impassable, right? But you're going ahead and saying like, okay, I'm gonna try to do a play here, knowing that there's like, quite a few things here to potentially stop you. I mean, you didn't really look, so you don't really know what's there, but like, I assume that in your mind you're thinking that this is enough to stop you, so you're going with a I'm gonna just go around kind of play, which is totally fine. What I would say though, well, 2 things. Firstly, while it's okay to build the lab on the fronts, the fact that you're doing hovercrafts at the fronts, I feel like this should be in the back. Like this should be like maybe back here or something. Simply because you can assume that there's an enemy radar in this, like, within this cloud, and anything you produce out of here that goes into the water, they're gonna see it. So before you even like start your assaults, they're gonna see the hovercraft coming. Whereas if you put it back here, say their radar ends here, or maybe let's even say it ends all the way up here, right? Just to show the difference. Like if you had a bunch of hovercraft that pool up down here, or maybe they pool up over here, right? Even if they pull up on the in the radar range, they're still on land, and your opponents might think like, okay, it's just a bunch of units, and then all of a sudden you just like rush them all out at once, you know, send them all the way up here, and your opponent, if they have slower moving units, it's harder for them to respond to it. So it just like makes it harder for them to respond. Small little tidbit, but might come into play here. The other thing that I would say, that if you're going to transition labs, you know, especially with low metal, you want to reclaim this first lab. You know, and the reason is, you know, you're not using it right now. You're planning to build hovercrafts, so you're not going to use this lab for a minute. And even if you try to use the lab, it's just going to be a lot of different stuff trying to be built at once, and it's going to be a bit too much for your economy. So you might as well reclaim it, get that money back. I believe it's 620, yeah, for this lab. So that 620 could be metal put into this lab, because otherwise you just have two labs sitting there with a bunch of metal that was used to build them that you don't have to make units or economy with anymore. So definitely reclaim this. You have a res bot, you can reclaim it with that. You also have the turd and this construction bot that can reclaim it as well. And I don't know if I mentioned this in the last video, but reclaiming something that's alive, that's living still, is a 100% return on metal. So you do get the full 620 back. You know, and same thing with this hover play. Like you can, for example, say like, okay, I'm gonna try to get there with some hovers, but if that doesn't work, then there's no point of me having this lab still. Or maybe you do want to try again, but either way, you know, try to do one thing or the other. Don't try to do both, or otherwise it's just a bunch of metal sitting there. Yeah, it looks like you're being a little bit sieged by some artillery. This is, you know, you basically have to back up a bit. Looks like, yeah, red spotted your hovercraft play already, and it hasn't even like begun yet. Where's the radar? Okay, radar's just all the way back here, but even one that far back sees up to here. And because your lab is well within that range, he sees all your hovercrafts going into the water. Just to hammer that point in a little bit further. One of the things that you can do against, you know, if someone starts using artillery, is put up a jammer. The Cortex jammer is a little bit shorter range, but it's a lot cheaper than the Armada version. And you need a T1 construction bot for it, or a T1 constructor for it, I should say, not necessarily a bot. But you can't do it with your commanders, is what I'm saying. But yeah, basically in utility, there's this short-range jamming device. For core, it's only 115. But you could put this, and anywhere within this circle will not show up on radar. You know, so you could put one in the middle, or you could put like, you know, like one here and then one over here. But basically that just means these artillery cannot fire on those units unless they see them, or if they're like, they can still manually fire on it, like with the A attack or with the attack commands, you know, just by hitting A. You know, it can like say, you know, you can tell your artillery to fire on something that's not even, you know, they don't necessarily know that's there. But it makes it a lot harder, basically. So anyways, let's take a look at how that goes. You're still adding on energy, that's good. You know, whenever you want to do T2 or whatever, you know, having that energy is going to be nice. Also, just, you know, wind speed's dipping down, so it's good for you that you're doing that for that reason. So let's see, do you have an energy storage? Okay, I don't see a storage. A storage would help a lot. I don't know if I forgot to mention this for green. And actually I might not have mentioned it because the solar collectors kind of even out the winds, but here, especially because you're pure wind here, putting the storage down means that anytime the wind dips crazy low, you now have you know, a bank of energy to work with, you know, so that you don't run out immediately. So it just like smooths it out quite a bit. Same thing with green. I was saying you could get the geo. You know, usually you want to wait till like, I don't know, I usually say like at least 300 energy, but you could potentially do it with less depending on how much build power you put on it and stuff like that. So I mean, 300 is kind of like a middle of the ground kind of way to look at it. Um, it depends on how fast you're trying to build it. So yeah, red already has these pounders in position to take these out. All right, so here shurikens show up, and these are the main thing that are able to defend this because I mean the incisors can definitely catch up to these hovercrafts, but the pounders cannot. They're very, very slow. So they can't really defend beyond, sitting here at the coast, realistically. But yeah, these shurikens are a very good defensive unit. Um, and the moment that you see these shurikens should signal to you to build some sort of anti-air. Um, and when I say that, I mean probably one at your front line and one at your base. Um, that way, if like right now, you only see shurikens, right? You don't know if there's bombers or if they even plan to make bombers. So you don't really want to overproduce anti-air, but having a couple would be nice. And again, especially at the front line because shurikens stunning these units and then having a bunch of units just like run through can be game ending for sure. So just be careful of that. The commander's pretty good against them, but limited range, so keep that in mind. And then the anti-air at the base is basically if you do bombers, I want to have a head start into making anti-air. Um, so if you have good radar coverage and see bombers on the way, you want to respond to that immediately and put down a whole lot of. I mean, you don't need like a ton, but like put down like say like 3 or 4 more nettles or something like that. Um, Personally, I think at this point in the game, putting down like a SAM or putting down an Eradicator is a bit much. I mean, you could potentially put down a SAM, but the thing is, it takes a minute to build. It takes a little bit, so like, you kind of need to put that down ahead of time. And 300 metal is, it's not like a lot of metal, but it's not nothing. And so, personally, I like to do more of a reactive play and say like, okay, I'm gonna have a head start and have maybe a thistle, maybe two, if I feel like the bombing run's gonna for sure happen. Um, but then once I see the bombers, I'll say build like 3 or 4 more really quickly. I'll try to build it within the range of my construction turrets and manually have the construction turrets assist those anti-air buildings so that they're done and ready to go by the time the bombers actually get to your base. Um, the other thing I want to mention with that is, um, as soon as you see air, you might want to notify your ally. I'm not sure if you guys are like in voice chat or something like that, but um, either way, knowing how this game goes, I know that uh, you guys get bombed a little bit in a little bit. So yeah, I mean, not everyone plays with sound on, and they might not have they might not hear the notification of air units. Um, so especially if you see bombers, you want to point that out ASAP. So yeah, reasonable defense from red in this position. That hovercraft play definitely could have worked, but unfortunately they saw it, and they also had shurikens prepped and ready to go for that. Now, there is an anti-air hovercraft, and in fact, bots, the anti-air is also amphibious, so these trashers can go in the water as well. Um, so potentially, I mean, this might be high risk, but potentially you could do a hovercraft play again, but just bring like one anti-air bot with it or something, or maybe stack up more hovercraft first and then go. And again, ideally outside of their radar range so that they don't see it coming. The other thing I want to note is T1 bots do not have well, actually T1 or any bot does not have an amphibious constructor. Vehicles do. vehicles have an amphibious constructor. They're a little bit more expensive for a little bit less build power, but I said this in the other video, but I just want to reiterate here because in your position you don't have very many mexes. So for you, it'd be even more advantageous to have these mexes back here. And those are underwater mexes, so things on land cannot shoot at them. And same with the constructor. The constructor is underwater as well, so it's kind of like hidden in a way unless they have sonar. But yeah, that would just give you some extra metal. Since you did go hovercraft, you can build hovercraft constructors, and those can build those water mexes. Same thing with the commander. The commander can just walk over and build some mexes on there too. It snaps just like any other mex. It's just underwater. So yeah, I'd highly recommend doing that sort of thing. All right, so moving on. I see that you're getting a T2 lab. You have plenty of metal, so like it's not a bad time to do it. However, your ally's already getting a T2 lab, and it might be more advantageous, since his lab is mostly done already, to just give him the metal for it, and basically buy the T2 constructor, or buy a T2 constructor. And then as you're doing that, you can still produce units if you want. This is kind of a vulnerable spot for green, because that's just a lot of metal going into a lab. So green potentially could get pushed, or you could get pushed. So it might be good for one of you to be getting units while the other one gets the lab. And then once the lab's done, they can produce a T2 constructor for you as well as themselves. So essentially buying a T2 constructor, because a T2 constructor is like, it's like about 500 metal, which is, it's not cheap, but it's a heck of a lot cheaper than a T2 lab. And ideally, having that T2 constructor first to build the T2 mexes will help you get those mexes faster, instead of putting a bunch of metal into a lab, being out of metal, and then trying to build the mexes after that, with that thing just sitting there, that has a lot of your metal in it. And in fact, one of the things that you can do, if you are the one to build the lab, is you can get a metal storage, and reclaim the T2 lab after you get your T2 constructor out, and then use the metal to upgrade a few of your mexes, and then rebuild the lab. And that'll just, increase your metal output by so much that it's basically you're benefiting from having those faster, because T2 mexes are 4 times stronger. They're more expensive, but they're 4 times the income. So it's kind of a big deal having them, and getting them ASAP is kind of important. Or if you didn't, if you felt like you couldn't really afford the lab quite yet, or you want to prioritize getting even more mexes, maybe getting an advanced Geo or something like that, you could produce a T1 lab again and crank units out of there, type of thing, or the hovercraft lab. But either way, these could be reclaimed. You could send metal to your ally so that he can get this up faster. Because you both building a lab makes you both vulnerable for a time. Here comes the bombers. Yeah, so green has 1 metal. Tries to bomb, he doesn't really get anything done with that. And he comes straight to you because he knows that there's a nettle there. By the way, if you're doing an airplay like this with bombers, send a scout with the bombers. Because doing it like this, from Yellow's perspective, I mean, it's kind of hard because the bombers are over this already, but potentially Yellow does not know where any of these buildings are. And knowing where they are ahead of time means that you can actually target where the structures are instead of randomly like Yellow did. So definitely not the best bombing run. But there is only one nettle finished. So that means, you know, they can circle back, do some more damage. And so now you're kind of hurting a bit because you have lost quite a bit of energy here. So when this happens, you want to immediately look at your resources. What do you need right now? In some cases, bombing the build power is a big deal, and sometimes that's what you need to prioritize first. In this particular case, you're out of metal and energy, and your energy is especially low. So you want to tackle that ASAP and rebuild the mexes ASAP. You're already building some wins, so like you're kind of okay on that. But it's low enough that it's a bit of an emergency, so I would say use your commander, build a couple more wins, just build like maybe 6 more. Maybe use one of these bots to grab these mexes again. And like you might even want to pause your T2 constructor being built because your resources just cannot handle. I mean, first of all, you know, you're putting a lot of resources into getting the constructor itself. And then for the constructor to make T2 stuff is expensive. You know, so you can't really afford to get T2 stuff anymore because of that bombing. So you want to fix your energy ASAP. Try to get your metal back. You know, your metal's actually, a lot of it's in these labs. You have this bot lab and this hovercraft lab. Actually, to put some numbers onto that, this hovercraft lab is 900 metal. So that's 900 metal and then another 620 metal that's literally just sitting here, not doing anything. So at the very least, you know, reclaim one. If you reclaim both, let's see, 900 and what's the other one? 6. Yeah. So I mean, I guess you once overflow because your metal's so low, but you want to be careful that you don't overflow if you're trying to eat both labs at the same time. Is the point that I'm trying to make. But yeah, either way, you want to get a little bit of metal back to be able to put it back into economy and straighten that out ASAP. Because the faster you straighten that out, the easier it is going to be for you to get back on track with building stuff. See, so you have some energy. Metal is definitely a big concern. These mexes are really cheap, so these are things that you can just like grab without even thinking about it. And by the way, in terms of like efficiency, like in terms of like how much cost you're putting into something and how much you're getting out of it, T1 mexes are like the efficient unit to get metal. They're more efficient than T2 mexes. They're more efficient than converters. You know, they're basically you know, a big deal to have. So grab those ASAP. They're only 50 metal, so you know, compared to the T2 mex, which is 640, significantly more, 12 times or 13 times almost more than T1 mex. 4 times the payoff, but you know, it takes a minute for it to actually pay for itself. Alright, so your energy is actually, you know, like your recovery is actually okay. It's not that bad. Grabbing these mexes a little bit faster would have been more optimal. Building a few more energies or wind turbines would have helped you out a little bit there too. But yeah, not too bad, not too bad. But your energy is in a rough enough spot that's, you know, the more of these mexes that you grab, the less energy you're going to have, because each of these T2 mexes is minus 20 per second. So that's just something to consider. You know, usually at this point you want to have some extra energy stockpiled so that this transition with these mexes and stuff is a little bit smoother. But since you got bombed and you lost a bunch of it, one of the things that you want to be thinking about is this geo. You know, do you want to grab a T1 geo really quick just to like get some quick energy? You know, do you want to try to get the T2 geo right away? And that's like extremely efficient, but you know, at the same time, it's going to cost a lot of energy. Looking at this from what I know, I would say that your energy is too low to really try for the geo right now. I would instead Really prioritize a lot of wins. If you had a storage, rebuild it. If you don't, get a storage, um, and just build up to like, I don't know, at least like 400, 500 energy before doing a T1 geo, and then something a little bit close to like 1,000 energy going for the T2 geo. Just to put some rough numbers out there. Okay, so you're going Sheldon. Okay, so this is a tricky thing. So Core T2 bots do not have a lot of range generally. You have Sheldons, but their range is actually kind of limited, and their actual damage is quite low. They more or less just like do bits of slow damage over time. But they are rather cheap, right? They're 400 metal, but they're not going to fare too well against things that have longer range, such like artilleries and such. Um, and sumos and mammoths, they're slower, so it's going to be hard for them to like get in range before taking a lot of damage. Um, so there's that. Um, yeah, I don't really know what's here to tell you which units to get, but those are just things that I want to point out. Fiends are a great choice, generally speaking, early on. Um, but they aren't very tanky either, so something to consider. All right, so you see a tiger here. There's a couple of wins on the front, not a big deal. Yeah, so definitely back up. Yeah, okay, so you are cloaking. Okay, so I was gonna say one of the things you can do is just stand still and cloak, and then degun it. Oh, you missed, unfortunately. Oh, this is a bad time because the wind is so low. It's only at 5. It's at the lowest it can be. And after getting bombed, you don't really have a ton of energy to spare on cloaking and degun and all that, so that's kind of rough. Which is another reason to like prioritize that stuff. Okay, so you decide to get a couple of solars. I don't mind that because you do have the metal, and this will just like boost you up while the wind is low. But with the wind speed being as high as it can go, it probably won't be at 5 for very long, and so this might be a bit much here. Storage would have helped a lot better than these solars. But yeah, these are options for you to reclaim this. You can reclaim this when you don't need them anymore. Okay, so you are going for the T2 geo. This is a bit much at the moment. It's not going to show the full minus amount because you don't have it. But essentially, this is trying to use a lot of energy to build this. You just don't have it. So this is more something you want to work up to because your energy is just so darn low. Like usually at this point in the game, players will have about 1,000 energy. So this can go up a lot smoother. But your energy's like, I mean, I guess wind is only at 11 right now, but like 300 energy is not much at all. Now you're being assaulted here. So yeah, this I would say go for the basic geo first, and even before that you could go for an advanced solar. I mean, basically anytime that you feel the need to build basic solars, I mean early on it's fine to do that, but and if you lose a lot of energy it's fine to do that too. But if you have to sink low enough to build some basic solars, you can't afford a big expensive energy thing. So you want to work up to it like I was saying, and you got the basic solars. Maybe the next step after that could be an advanced solar, 1 or 2 of those. They're not terribly efficient, but they're still way more efficient than basic solar. They do cost 4,000 energy, so it is, it's not nothing. Excuse me. It's not nothing. It's a reasonable amount, so you want to work up to that as well. But you have enough that you're basically worked up to it right now, assuming that wind is not too low, and it's fine right now. So you could do an advanced solar. Instead of after the advanced solar, you could go for basic geo, and then after the basic geo, you could go for this advanced geo. Because yeah, basically by building such a big thing and not having the resources for it, you're basically saying, I want to slow build this right now, and I want to spend all my resources on it. And what that means is you can't really spend on anything else. So the fact that you're trying to spend on building units at the same time means these units are going to come out very, very slowly. This advanced geo is going to go up very, very slowly. And it's just like delaying everything basically. So this ETA keeps jumping up because you just don't have the energy for it. And this is kind of a crucial time when you need those units because you're being attacked so heavily right now. So this in a way is shooting you in the foot. And if you ever find yourself in this position, and you like just all of a sudden realize like, oh, I need units now, you can switch some of your build power over to your lab. So what you do is take this constructor, right click, so that you see that guard, the guard icon, that circle, that blue circle is the guard icon. But that guard icon will tell this constructor, I only want you to assist this lab. And it'll do that indefinitely. So like, if you do that, at some point to switch it off, you can, so that it assists anything in range, you want to hit S on it, stop. Actually, I don't have that button showing, but yeah, you stop it or you use fight commands on a piece of terrain, and it'll go back to just assisting whatever. And then what you could also do, because the T2 builder has a little bit of extra build power compared to some other stuff, you can move this guy off of this geo and use just this T1 constructor. Or you could even pause these. You could pause, again, the button's not showing, but or I guess it'd be wait. It's technically called wait with W, so that they don't spend the resources building this, but they're still like there, so that it doesn't like die slowly. But yeah, as it is, you're actually not taking too much damage. You're actually kind of fine, especially since this tiger's not moving in. It's just kind of dying. Yeah, so you're basically fine here. There is a lot of metal wrecks here that you can use, but unfortunately, energy is still a big issue for you. And it will be until this is done, essentially. Yeah, so after a battle like this, after there's a bunch of wrecks, especially if those wrecks are on your turf, usually I would tell players to consider rebuilding a T1 bot lab so that you can build some resurrection bots. As it is, you already have one, so you could just build out of it. But those are also going to take energy. That's the main thing about the res bots, is they just use a lot of energy. And if you are so low on energy, that usually means your metal's going up. And so if your metal's already going up, getting a bunch of reclaim isn't going to really help you. And in order to resurrect those units, you need a lot of energy. So either way, it's sort of like you need the energy to be able to spend the metal, or you need the energy to be able to res stuff for that to be useful. Which you will have after this is done, so you could start thinking about that. I'm really glad that you're rebuilding this radar each time. Very, very important. Your ally, this is when he started to attack a little bit. But yeah, it looks like, okay, it's good that you're at least poking. Alright, so now that you have that energy, you spent a bunch of time to put resources into this geo, and now all of a sudden you have a huge surplus of energy. And you also have a lot of metal from before, right? So what you need to do here, as this is finishing, like basically like right as it's done, you want to consider building some build power, because you have a ton of energy now, you have a ton of metal, and so you can assume, or let me rephrase that. You had a bunch of metal like being stockpiled because you didn't have enough energy, and then all of a sudden, boom, this thing's done. You have a big surplus of energy, and now you have no way to spend your resources. So you want to consider, more construction turrets basically to be able to, and then you can crank units out of here really, really quickly. Um, okay, so unfortunately this blindsides you a bit. Um, there's ships out here, and ships are really good against units. Um, it's hard for units to deal with ships, and so this is quite a strong move from our red player here. There's really not too much you can do about it, but one of the things that you can do is build these rolling bombs. I don't know if you played StarCraft 2, but they're basically banelings. They roll around and they run into stuff and blow up, and they're amphibious. And since you're Cortex, you have two options. You have the Bedbug, and you have the Scuttle. Now, see how cheap they are? Like, the Bedbug is only 70 metal. That's cheaper than most T1 units. Like, that's crazy. The Scuttle, much more expensive, but also much bigger boom. And also, it's cloaking. So you can cloak it, which eats a ton of energy. Like, in this state, you could really only afford having one out at a time. I mean, maybe two. I think it's just one, though, right now. But yeah, basically, you can build either the cloaking version or the non-cloaking version. The cloaking version they can still see on radar and shoot at, they just can't see it in line of sight. So keep that in mind. But either way, they do quite well against ships, and ships have a hard time dealing with them. Not all ships can attack stuff underwater. As it so happens, Red here has built destroyers, which can. They have a depth charge launcher, but the range of it is not this big circle. That's actually the cannon that they have. The range is only 400, and the cannon's range is 710. So this big circle is 710 range. So 400 range would be something like, it would be something like there, around these ships. So essentially, like, they have a range of like that. So you can either A, avoid them, or B, if you have enough of them, they can still get through and kill the ships. But either way, your main focus, in a way, should be to try to assault this base, take it out, and then take out these ships afterwards. I mean, the order doesn't really matter that much. Take out the ships or take out the base. I say base first because if you take out the ships first, that gives them time to respawn and defend their base. As it so happens, Red already has some torpedo launchers. So, I mean, I can't say that I've played around with that too much. But I feel like if you had enough bombs, that they could still get in here and do quite a bit of damage. And just remember, they are so darn cheap if you do the Bedbug. If you do the other one, then it kind of depends on if they have sonar. And some ships have sonar, like these destroyers have 400 sonar range, which is the same as the depth charge. And then Red could also have a sonar radar thing, so there's that too. So you gotta consider all that stuff. Or you could use a scuttle, and either if they have sonar, then there's a good chance that a lot of those underwater weapons will miss. So scuttle's actually a pretty good call. But I would actually try Bedbug first here, just because it's like you want to know if they have actual defenses or not first before committing to something a little bit heavier like a Bedbug. Anyways, let's move on. I think I pretty much covered what I wanted to cover for sure. I believe this game's going to probably end pretty soon. But yeah, here your resources are completely full, you're overflowing. And that build, okay, so you are adding on build power now. But yeah, ideally try to anticipate doing that. Because your meta was already rising pretty good. And then you finally got this done, and all of a sudden you can actually spend it. Yeah, green over here battling for his life. And yeah, just by the way, fiends are not going to do well against ships whatsoever. Now, fiends are a reasonable choice against this. Not necessarily against pounders, but you know, against T1 stuff, they're pretty good. But yeah, taking all that extra damage from the ships is a very big deal. So let's see, you try sumo. So one of the things that you can do here, I'm not sure if the music's kind of loud for you guys, but it's pretty loud for me, so I'm going to turn that down. So one of the other things you can do here, because I kind of feel like you're just kind of trying stuff out at this time, you know, trying to deal with the ships. Basically, anything short range is automatically crossed off the list, because the ships, like, you know, if you try to attack the ships will just back up and kill all the units. Things like sumos have short range. They only have 275 range, which is very, very low. Fiends, very, very low as well at 230. So not great options. Mammoths can do okay, but they're, you know, they have 650 range, but they're also very expensive and very slow. So it's pretty easy for an opponent to basically say, like, hey, I'm gonna just avoid the mammoths. What you actually need is something, first of all, to see the ships. Wait, you have a radar. How come you can't see it? That's interesting. Does he have a jammer or something? Okay, there is a... Oh, okay. I guess I didn't realize that the ship jammer is actually huge range. But yeah, you need some kind of line of sight to see it, to see the ships, and then you also need something with range. And then also probably something to cloak your units so that they can't be fired upon. So essentially what that's going to mean is having a jammer bot, having a radar bot. Radar bots, by the way, have significant line of sight at 925. A jammer to like hide your units in so that they can't be attacked. And then something long range, and Core has the Arbiter, which Armada does not have this unit in the bot lab. So this is actually a great unit to have. It's 600 metal, so it's like the same price as a Sumo. And it has extreme range. It has 1210 range. You know, so that's kind of huge. So that they can actually fire on the ships, and the ships have to like try to dodge the missile that's coming down on them. So a few of those would really help. Yeah, I think that's probably your best option out of here, because Sheldons don't do enough damage to really kill a ship. You know, like I was saying before, you could use the bombs. Scuttle is, you know, would be okay as long as you know, it's not dying before it gets to the target. All this other stuff has shorter range. Actually, ducks are a reasonable choice as well. So ducks are the one land unit that can fire while underwater. The counterpart is the platypus, and that sits above the water and it has like a laser attack and stuff like that. But the duck has like an underwater torpedo that it fires, and then it also has a land laser that's not very strong either. But the torpedo is actually great. It has reasonable range for a torpedo. It actually has the same range as the destroyer depth charge, and it's a bit stronger. It's quite a strong attack. So ducks are actually a good option here as well. So again, they're amphibious like you know, any other amphibious unit, but they're the one amphibious unit that can attack while underwater. So they can actually attack those ships and the shipyard and all that. And they do reasonably well against basically anything that isn't a like a T2 submarine. They're going to do pretty well against. Alright, sorry, I had to change my mic battery real quick. I forgot to change it beforehand, as I do. But yeah, basically this game is basically over. Oh, looks like you got a res bot stuck. This will happen anytime you have a reser that's trying to get somewhere they can't actually reach. which is this water because it's too deep for this guy. This poor little guy. Okay, so you get the reclaim from the commander that you lost, which is great. In a 2v2 kind of situation, it might make more sense to resurrect it, just in case something happens to Green's commander. Let's see, so yeah, it seems like your plan with those sumos was just to like ignore the ships and just keep running through. Which isn't really going to work out because they're such a slow unit. They just like waddle up here, waddle up, you know, they just like, they just like meander, like, I'm just gonna walk into the enemy base. Meanwhile, just getting shot at by all the frigates or all the destroyers, so it's kind of hard to do that. If you're gonna try to do something like that, try to add like a jammer with it. Let's see, so now you're trying to assume, or I'm sorry, Mammoth. I get a little mixed up because in Total Annihilation, these were called sumos, and the sumo was called the can. So a bit of a difference there. But yeah, it looks like the game's over with the commander dying over here. Oh, was that a nuke? Guess I missed that. Wait, what? Was that not a nuke? Or am I just not seeing the nuke? Oh, that's the Geo exploding. Okay, my bad. I'm just I didn't even think about it being a Geo. Yeah, okay, that makes more sense. But anyways, sorry to get hung up on that. Um, just to reiterate what I was talking about, just to like make a little summary. So there's little bits that you could have optimized with the opener, but that's kind of being a little nitpicky. I think the main thing for you is firstly not poking up here to see what was there, and potentially because you open bots, you kind of need to get into the base and try to do some damage. Because if you don't, then you're just kind of sitting on units that don't necessarily just like fight super well. And in this particular scenario, in this like narrow corridor, I would very much recommend rocket bots. In fact, the narrower the area, the better the rocket bots are going to do, because the rockets, if you have like a line of rocket bots, and they all fire, say like up towards targets up here, each of these lines represents where the rocket will hit a unit if it's there. So even if they're like, say, firing at something back here, if an enemy walks, right there, it'll get shot by that rocket moving through. Or, after the rocket fires, like it can shoot a little bit further in some cases. And so now, like, they can't really dodge by just running back either. It's kind of like they're going to take some hits. So to dodge rockets, players need to go like, horizontally to dodge those rockets, and it's just going to be much harder to do in this narrow area. So yeah, I highly recommend the rockets for sure. When it comes to the T2 transition, I would say since you and your ally both went T2 at the same time, it leaves both of you very vulnerable. And so I would recommend instead sharing some metal over to that player so they can get that lab faster, and or buying a T2 constructor from them once it's done. Either just send them a bunch of metal so they can get the thing up faster, and then you can ask for one because they you sent a bunch of metal, or if you can't spare the metal, they can still build the lab on their own, but maybe bank up a little bit of money to give to them so that they can more easily produce a T2 constructor for you. And usually the cost is about 400, so you kind of want to pay them back, otherwise that's just like it's just going to slow them down if you don't. But yeah, much cheaper than building the lab yourself. And anytime you do stuff like that and you're not using a lab, reclaim it. Like you had that hovercraft lab and you had that tier 1 lab. That's just like literally a bunch of metal that could have gone into something else. Um, let's see. The hovercraft play I think was a good idea. It's just unfortunately you put the hovercraft thing right within radar range, and they saw the hovercrafts go into the water immediately, and so they had plenty of time to respond. Um, it's like going, you know, building it back here and then just like kind of slipping around this way, trying to avoid getting seen by the radar, would have worked out a lot better. Um, and then yeah, getting bombs definitely hurts. Trying to be a little bit quicker with the anti-air, putting as much build power in that anti-air as you can, uh, when you need it. Um, but having one or two anti-air beforehand, knowing that there is at least some kind of air on the board, is a very reasonable thing to do. I just wouldn't go too overboard with it because you don't really know if they're planning to spend money on a bombing run or not. Um, so there's all that. And then yeah, when it came to T2 and the actual units that you produced, that's about the time when Red showed that he had ships. And I think your unit picks were not a great choice for what was out here. Um, you tried using sumos and you tried using mammoths. Either way, those units are a bit too slow to really do too much. And um, trying to just like run through here with those slow units means they're just getting barraged and picked off before they even get to their target. Um, and the fiends, I mean, arguably the fiends are maybe a better choice because they're faster. But they also die a lot faster, so like it's not a great choice in that regard either. So your only real option is to like maybe jam your units and move them along this side so that these ships do not have line of sight on them. Um, or you could deal with the ships directly by getting, you could either try using bedbugs slash scuttles. Scuttles, by the way, they might not be on cloak by default, because you have the option as a player to like tell them to not cloak and save some energy. But they do require a lot of energy to cloak, so keep that in mind as you're using them. And also that cloaked units of course still show up on radar. So there's you could potentially do that to deal with it. Ducks are a great option. Um, really the only sea unit that can deal well with ducks would be submarines, like T2 submarines specifically, or a mass amount of destroyers. And if you're doing that duck play, you kind of want to build up a bunch of them before showing your hand. Kind of like the hovercraft. Like I think if you had built up a few more hovercraft, um, it would have been harder for those shurikens to stop all of them if you had more of them. Um, but same thing with the ducks. It's going to be harder to stop them if there's more of them, if they're not as prepared for it because you didn't show them it yet. Um, and then yeah, the other option would be to do something like arbiters to pick off these ships, but it'd be hard to get line of sight on them because they're being jammed. You can't rely on radar. Or in a way, you could use manual fire to guess where the ships are and just make it annoying for them to be there. Um, but yeah, T2 ships is kind of a big investment from Red. To some degree, well, I mean, Red's gonna know that your base is here no matter what, right? So like, you could potentially do stuff like this where he parks a battleship out here and barrages your base. But I was gonna say like what you could potentially do is avoid this whole area and just go help your ally down this avenue. But like I was just saying, like yeah, these ships can probably shoot you still, so like that's not really a great option either. Your only real option is to take Red out or take out the shipyard. Um, Anyways, that about does it for me. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, of course, you can ask them either in the thread or in the comments for this video. Um, and yeah, I hope you learned something. Um, anyways, catch you guys later.